My name is Charlie Seabrook, and I'm going to talk to you about and show you some of our recent drilling that we've been doing here. This is hole 120075, and the headline intercept for that was 168 metres at 3.9 grams per tonne gold. So a pretty exciting hole, and I'll show you why. The hole is called pretty much in mineralisation. We see here, we start off in the mafic, ultramafic sediments, but you can see that they're pretty finely laminated, they're quite deformed, and straight away from surface you can see it carries a bit of gold. The gold grades incidentally are written on the box in green. Here you can see the gold grades written for every metre, or at least every sample. So as we go down the hole, you can see that the deformation starts to pick up, quite intense veining. These are sort of quartz carbonate veins, which are sort of pretty much pervasive through the whole rock in this section. Here we can see the grades start to pick up a bit more. We're getting into sort of typical 1 gram, 2 gram type material. And that is related to the pyrite content and the intensity of the veining. As we continue here, we get a more intense veining, more intense pyrite content, and you can see that the grades jump up a bit to 3 grams, 2 grams type material, and these grades continue throughout this broad zone. In this part of the hole, we have a nice intersection here where we get 21 grams, and this is spatially associated with some larger veins, which are quartz tourmaline veins in here. You can see the dark mineral there is probably tourmaline, and we have very, very fine disseminated pyrite throughout this intensely veined and deformed stockwork style mineralization at this point. You can see here there's parts which look quite brecciated, and a lot of that is due to just the intensity of fracturation of the rock. So the grades continue throughout this part of the hole, and as we move down the hole, we're starting to approach some more felsic sedimentary rocks. But you can see that the foliation and the veining continues in the same sorts of ways that we've been seeing it throughout. This section here, again, more very intense veining, and a bit of a fuchsitic overprint. That's the slight green colour you can start to see coming into the rock, with some very good grades over this section. And the next couple of metres are much the same as that, with equivalent grades. And then we move towards the sedimentary context. But really, look, we've really got quite a number of metres which are very, very similar looking rock and very, very similar looking grades. Of particular interest here, you can see where we move out of this mafic, ultramafic laminated material into suddenly this much coarser unit here. This is a coarse sandy unit, and you can see that the gold grade jumps up dramatically in association with a lot of the intense pyrite that you're now seeing in this slightly more porous rock. It continues to be veined and laminated, but we are now seeing much more felsic sedimentary component in the rocks. And here are some more very fine grained sedimentary rocks with slightly more of a mafic overprint as well. But you can see that we start to transition now into some more finer grained sediments, and slowly you can see that we lose the mafic component. We start getting much more felsic material, and that's particularly marked by the transition to a strong albite alteration overprint, which you can see very clearly over here. Here you can start seeing very clearly the albite overprint, and that's this sort of brownish reddish colour rock. This is surrounded by a lot of laminations of sort of grey-green sericite material. So what you have here is an albite rock, fine-grained sediment altered to albite, with laminations of sericite all the way through it. And you can see here that creates a sort of grey-green red network of veins. And I hope you've been noticing as well that the gold grade throughout is maintained as we made that transition from the mafic rocks into these felsic rocks. Here we're seeing some very nice grades up to 12 grams per metre. And you can see that in places it looks quite brecciated. Here we have quite an intense network of siderite veins that's these sort of yellowish coloured carbonate veins. We have some lower grade sections within this rock. We do think that a lot of the gold grade is controlled in these albite rocks by the level of fracturation. Because the albite rock is quite brittle, it fractures in a brittle sort of way, and you get these microveinlets coming through, and we think that is controlling the gold grade. So in areas where you see these lower grades, not so intensely broken rocks with less fractures, and then areas where the grade picks up again, you can see that it becomes slightly more broken with these dark veinlets and possibly brecciated in places. And we have thick sequences of this red-green sericite albite altered felsic sediments which host the gold mineralization. Come this way, and I'll show you something more interesting about this hole. This is following on in sequence from that last part of the hole that we were just looking at. You can see that the albite alteration has picked up in intensity, it's much deeper red, and you're starting to see these very, very intense fractures coming in, and the gold grade picking up increasingly, as you can see here. And then we get into this zone, this next zone, which is a very interesting texture. This is a breccia, which we believe is sort of a fluidized breccia. You can see that the clasts are quite angular. The matrix, the very dark matrix that you can see is predominantly hematite. So we have clasts of this albite altered felsic sediments within a hematite matrix, creating this breccia. And this is actually turns out to be quite characteristic. We've managed to trace this breccia through a number of sections now, and you can see that it carries some pretty reasonable grades in it as well, with material up to 9 grams. But you can see how fractured and broken the zone is, and that's obviously a key structural event. You can see that the broken zone persists away from that breccia itself, and it continues to be fractured and brecciated. It continues to carry gold grades associated with that. And then as you move out again into these more unbroken felsic sediments, very, very similar to what we were looking at before the zone. This is all, it's becoming increasingly lower grade. And then you move into a zone of grey-green felsic sediments, which carries sort of background grade mineralization. I should point out that throughout the whole of this hole, even the parts which are not particularly well mineralized do carry background gold values in the order of 0.1, 0.2 type material. So that continues for quite some way along the hole. And you can see here that less altered and slightly less intensely veined felsic rocks contain this background mineralization. And this carries on until further down the hole we have another repeated sequence of more intense brecciation within the albite rocks, and the gold grades pick up again, and we get another nice intercept.